What if you don't want a fancy, high-end professional camera? What if you just want a normal camera for a normal person? This kind of camera attracts three different types of photographer. We have the professional working photographer, the enthusiast hobby photographer, and the casual beginner photographer. This casual photographer is our normal person in search of a normal camera. 20 years ago, they'd be taking their favorite point and shoot digital camera everywhere with them, before those cameras were replaced by our phones. But today, when our smartphones dominate pretty much everything in our day-to-day lives, they want something a little bit different, with a unique experience for taking photos. This gap in options for the casual photographer is very real. Since smartphone photography has become the default, actually buying and owning a dedicated camera feels like a much harder decision, not the obvious choice. There now feels like there's much more of a learning curve, as in you actually have to learn about curves. And that's a whole thing. So when a casual photographer sees the standard options from the big brands, the prices for a camera body, for lenses, SD cards, and software subscriptions, no wonder they're feeling a little bit intimidated. That's why this specific category of camera has actually become more popular. And these haven't just suddenly popped up out of nowhere, but they've definitely found their kind of more casual, normal person audience outside of the enthusiasts and the professional photographers. We're going to put the big red dot company just in the corner for a second. And instead, we're going to talk about one particular product line from a certain company that I think tries to fill this gap most ambitiously. And that is the Sony RX1 line of cameras. Having been a proud owner of the original Sony RX1 for a good year and a half or so, I loved the RX1. But I sold it because that slow autofocus on the original version was just too difficult to deal with after a while. Little did I know that only like a year or so later, Sony would go all in and release the latest iteration in the form of the RX1R Mark III. You have this amazing 35mm f2 Zeiss lens, much like on the original, and that is almost worth the deal on its own. That lens with a full frame sensor that you can fit inside a jacket pocket is pretty hard to beat. The two biggest shortcomings cited on the RX1R III have been the price versus the value that the camera offers and the lack of in-body image stabilization, or IBIS. However, considering a 61 megapixel full frame sensor usually goes for a similar amount of money in other camera bodies, without the lens and the size benefit, to me the price actually does make sense, even if I wouldn't personally spend that much money on the new camera itself. And on the IBIS front, the size of the body versus the size of the sensor is also a factor, which is kind of the opposite end of the spectrum to one of the cameras we're talking about later, which has a similar problem, but without the same excuse. But we'll get into that towards the end of this video. If you're like me and you've lost the original high quality images of photos from years ago, you're going to be very interested in this video's sponsor, Video Proc Converter AI. I can drop in these low resolution images and upscale them by 2 times, 3 times, or 4 times using one of their 4 AI models. In this case, I'm using their Gen Detail V3 model at 4 times resolution. Image AI takes a few seconds to generate the preview. Then you can use the zoom feature to compare the before and after previews and make any adjustments. From these few examples here, I'm very happy with the results, considering just how muddy all of these images were from their very compressed files. We also have a similar tool for video, with their AI Video Super Resolution tool. So I can take this very compressed download from YouTube and put this into the AI Video Super Resolution tool. Then you can choose to upscale the entire video, or just set your in and out points. You can then see from this final export, a lot of the detail has been restored and the image looks much cleaner. You can try Video Proc Converter AI for free today or save on a lifetime deal. So go check it out via the link in the description below. Since 2011, Fujifilm have been creating the very popular X100 line of cameras, and they have come a long way over the last few years. For years there were small iterations and gaining popularity before a significant jump in both features and crazy worldwide popularity with even non-photographers. I was an X100S owner back in 2021. That was the second iteration of this camera, and I owned it several years after that had come out, and I really enjoyed using it. But it's hard to compare that second generation with the current 6th generation of this camera. The current X100VI that I own at the moment has a 40 megapixel APS-C sensor, the famous hybrid viewfinder that's still there from the original cameras, in-body image stabilization unlike the RX1R III, a built-in ND filter for slow shutter photography and also for video shooting, a tilt LCD also unlike the RX1R III, and a leaf shutter, which it shares with the other cameras we're talking about in this video. It's a street photography camera with unnecessarily strong video credentials, which I think makes it a very complete and unique package, although not everyone agrees. It definitely has a fair few haters out there. All of this without even mentioning Fujifilm's famous film simulations. That one unique factor that gives you the option of shooting high quality images in lovely colors without the need to ever edit your raw files. And I think that is one of the main USPs for this camera that makes so many normal, casual photographers pick up this camera for the first time without needing to worry about software subscriptions or learning how to use curves or anything like that. You'll never have to touch editing software if you shoot on a Fujifilm. That's kind of the promise everyone is being sold. After years of wanting and waiting, the Lumix camp in the Micro Four Thirds community finally had their prayers answered. But what arrived? Was it really the Messiah? Or was it just a very naughty boy?
Now you listen here! He's not the Messiah, he's a very naughty boy!
Lumix graced us with this, the new Lumix L10. The same fixed zoom lens design as the old LX100, the LX100 Mark II, and Leica Deluxe cameras, but with updated ergonomics in the form of a larger body with a flip LCD. What's not to love? Well, the video forward company decided to opt out of the internal ND and IBIS, something that their incredibly photocentric competitor managed to put inside a smaller body with a larger sensor. But did they learn anything from Fujifilm's success? Yes. Well, they saw film simulations and thought, let's give it a more nerdy, less catchy name, and they implemented their new real-time LUT feature that has been around since the launch of the S9 a couple of years ago, but this actually does feel very at home in the L10. And this whole ecosystem is still building out, and it's becoming incredibly easy to find great LUTs that you want to shoot with. But is it still going to kind of capture the imagination of the normal, everyday photographer in quite the same way that Fujifilm's film simulations have? In a future video, I'm going to be comparing this new real-time LUT feature in the L10 with the built-in film simulations feature in the X100VI. I want to actually find out which one is the most usable in everyday situations and which one gives you the most convincing, pleasing results that you're happy to just share online straight away. So make sure you subscribe to the channel down below so you don't miss that one when it comes out. Now, I'd like to recap each of these cameras through kind of the lenses, perspectives of these three different archetypes: the professional photographer, the enthusiast, and the casual, normal person photographer. And we're going to start with the professional photographer. What are they actually looking for? Well, if sensor size and resolution is everything to the pro, then the RX1R Mark III is surely the choice. It's full frame, 61 megapixels, and a Zeiss 35mm f2 lens on a full frame sensor. That's surely everything they're going to want in top of the line specs. The Enthusiast here is actually the hardest to place because brand loyalty makes a large part of their decision making. I think if they cared absolutely the most about specs, top level, top of the line specs, and background separation, shallow depth of field, the Sony, the RX1R III is going to win. Others might care much more about having the best video specs and the best flexibility and value in a camera. And those, I think, would lean towards the Lumix L10. I think they would see past the shortcomings and they would use it and they would love it. The one camera I know they won't use is the TikTok camera. As for the casual photographer, I think they're probably the most interesting archetype to me because their wants aren't based on specs and bells and whistles and which brand has the best upgrade path and blah blah blah. They care much more about the immediate use case and what they want to shoot with it. And I think that is probably the purest way to approach a camera. And maybe they don't want to be worrying about having to have, multiple SD cards, software subscriptions for raw editing. They just want to have an SD card that stays in the camera, and then they export the JPEGs and transfer those to their phone and then share those on social media. And there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. There's actually something incredibly pure about that because you don't go through this whole secondary post-processing step with your photos. And I think that is why they are drawn so strongly to the X100 line of cameras and the X100VI. That and because they can't afford a Leica Q3. Because if they're a casual photographer and they're picking it up for the first time and they can afford a Leica Q3, they're gonna buy a Leica Q3. But if they can't, they'll go the way with us peasants and pick up an X100VI. But maybe, after they watch this video here, they might pick up an L10. And then the X100VI will go down in price. Or they just buy a Leica. It's one or the other, really.